All right, looks like it's 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. We do have quite a few more joining us, but wanted to say good morning. And on behalf on the Washington Association of Wheat Growers Animal Program, I'd like to welcome you today. This is part 2 of our 2022 educational series, and are excited you took time out of your day today to join us for the webinar. Later today, you will receive an email with a survey to help guide our programs. Thank you so much for your feedback. We also want to thank the sponsors that make these programs possible for our grower members and industry partners. For today's webinar, please use the chat box feature to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please keep your line muted, but feel free to make this an interactive event and jump in anytime with questions or discussion. We also have time at the end for questions with our speaker. Today, we are excited to welcome Joe Bippert with U.S. Wheat Associates. Joe serves as the Assistant Regional Director for South and Southeast Asia. He is a familiar face to Washington wheat growers, previously serving as the Program Director for the Washington Grain Commission. We will go ahead and turn it over to Joe.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lori, for the introduction. And as she mentioned, it's good to be among familiar faces. Washington is home to me. In fact, it still is home to me while I'm the Assistant Regional Director for U.S. Wheat based in Manila. I'm still waiting to move with my family, and I'm joining you from Spokane, Washington. So not too far away from everyone yet, but it's been exciting to get started and jump into the market as I began my tenure there in November and begin working with customers. It's almost like being jet lagged because I am certainly I'm working a lot of Manila hours, which means that I'm working a lot of nights and trying to connect with customers as we represent you in the region. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Lori, can everyone see my screen?
That looks great on my end.
Okay. Well, great. Well, again, thank you very much for being here. This is my first presentation in this role at U.S. Wheat, and so it's good to be among friends. I saw several names that I recognize and people that I've worked with over the years, and then some faces that I don't recognize yet. But as we go about this, feel free to engage in any kind of conversation. Cut me off and ask some questions, and we can make this a discussion. If you want, though, we can save those to the end as well and have a discussion then. As we look at the year that we just got through back in 2021, I would say that there has been significant challenges between COVID, a drought, significant inflation. All of this was felt not only here in the United States, but this was felt also as we looked at the region in Southeast Asia. But with these challenges, we also see a lot of opportunities. We've been able to take advantage of some of the opportunities as we go into the market. Here's a look at how our sales have done, our shipments to the region of South and Southeast Asia over time, over the last decade. As you can see, we've had incredible growth from the 2010-2011 marketing year to today, with over 50% growth as we've gone over time. And it seems to be doing nothing but going up. There has been a little bit of that's also explained even better if you look at our market share in terms of total shipments from the US to the region. We started at 11%. We've grown to about a quarter of all US wheat shipments. This big shift has happened over time as we've seen Russia come into the market and take over some of the regions in the Middle East and North Africa and have a foothold there. As we've seen some of that pressure coming from competition, the shift has moved to Asia, making this an incredibly important market for US wheat, but also for the Pacific Northwest in particular, being so close in proximity. Now, you might notice that there was a little bit of a dip, and certainly that does play into several factors. But overall, consumption of wheat-based foods has increased over time. It hasn't quite been the same as we've looked at the most recent years, growing only 1% annually. But if you look over the last several years, it's grown at an average rate of about 6% per year. Now, the reason for this slight decrease in the growth rate of milling wheat over time is really based on a couple of reasons. Now, I know that we've probably belabored the COVID-19 pandemic so much over the last 2 years, but it's really hard to ignore the impacts that had on the milling industry and the exports that have happened out in the region. Overall, though, Asia, Southeast Asia did quite well, with a lot of people contributing their success and mitigating the effects of the virus to whether it be their culture or maybe genetics or their use of face masks and or just simply a combination of all three. Also early in the pandemic, it was reported that Malaysia had done quite well. Vietnam not only managed to control the spread, but maintain positive economic growth throughout. And it's really fascinating that given the proximity to the origin, that we didn't see as many outbreaks of the magnitude that other areas in the world experienced. However, later on in 2020 and looking into 2021, we were hit by the various variants of COVID-19 that really saw some spikes that impacted the country. So as you can see here, Indonesia quadrupled their daily caseload within the span of just a couple of months. Vietnam also saw major spikes in a short period of time. Malaysia wasn't immune to that. And then the Philippines in 2021 reached a very grim milestone with over 40,000 deaths. So the surge finally did hit Asia. And what we saw is them starting to feel those impacts, and it showed through in some of the statistics that people were monitoring. So this is a ranking that Bloomberg does every month, where they rank 53 countries' ability to respond to the virus. These rankings look at things like vaccination rates, hospital capacity, economic factors, and lockdowns. At the end of October, I would say things were looking pretty grim for the region, with Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Philippines all ranking at the very bottom of Bloomberg's list. Now, if you do fast forward to today, things are starting to see improvements with vaccine rollouts in Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia. They've been able to steadily climb up the list and make some fairly big leaps in the recent month. But despite all of that, you also have been seeing Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines still continue to struggle on their vaccine rollouts, especially in trying to get the vaccines to more remote areas. Now that I've said that, what I want to do is also create some perspective around this ranking, because while you might think that those at the top are doing really well and those at the bottom are doing very poorly, I want to make sure that we take this ranking for what it's worth, because some of the top ranked countries are having their struggles, while some of those on the bottom seem to be recovering fairly well, especially in terms of their economy. But what I think it's safe to say is that the region hasn't fared well as the pandemic has progressed, and as people have taken notice, then they've become one of the most restrictive countries or restrictive areas in the world. So in terms of travel, it's very difficult to get into Asia. And when you do arrive, you're met with some of the most stringent quarantine protocols that exist, with mandatory quarantines up to 35 days, as we can see there in Macau. And despite the travel restrictions being lifted, there's still some significant risk of getting stuck in the country. We just had one of our employees at US Wheat who was at a meeting in Mexico and tested positive for COVID after arriving in country. So what that meant is she had to stay in Mexico for an additional 2 weeks before she was able to come home. That not only comes at significant expense to extending the travel, but the time missed at work, and several factors, which makes people fairly gun shy when wanting to travel overseas. As for my own personal journey to move my family to the Philippines, just 2 days ago, I received an email that a new resolution from the Philippine government that amended a previous resolution, which canceled the previous resolution before that, which ended the first resolution, stated that now for me to be able to move my family into the country, I need to once again apply for a travel ban exemption, which I had applied for about 2 months ago, but then was told that it wasn't necessary because of this resolution that came out. So things are changing very rapidly as we move throughout the pandemic. In the Philippines, on top of their mask mandate, they also require face shields, and in order to protect people's eyes from contracting the virus through your eyes. Now, some people have complained about this making it difficult to see, which makes me very concerned to take the public transportation system. As you can see here, the glare might impact the driver's ability to get me where I need to be safely. Others have come up with some very creative ways to comply with the mask mandate. This one I thought was particularly comical, although the funny thing is I don't know that they're compliant because underneath that, they don't have a cloth mask. This one certainly, I think, gets the A for creativity, but I don't know how effective that mask is going to be, but certainly people are trying to do everything they can to comply. Thailand especially has been hit hard by the travel bans. So once COVID spiked, or once COVID really hit, travel to Asia virtually flatlined. And Thailand, who has a significant portion of their economy dedicated to tourism, really has struggled to recover economically because of that. So these markets that are dependent on tourism tend to be slower to, we tend to see their recovery being slower as we go throughout the pandemic. Even though Thailand is open though, given the risks that I just mentioned, it's slow to have people commit to the expense and look at traveling there once again. So as they project out what tourism is going to be in Thailand, it looks like it's going to be a fairly slow recovery on that front. That has ripple effects into the economy. So this and other factors have significantly stunted some of the region's growth potential, which was booming prior to the pandemic. And Vietnam, like I had mentioned, has fared very well as they've gone throughout the pandemic. They've been able, through the strength of their manufacturing industry, been able to create a lot of the personal protective equipment, a lot of the electronic equipment that's used at the first response level, and really through their contact tracing has been able to keep their economy open and moving and growing. And so they've fared quite well throughout the pandemic. Indonesia has also had an aggressive fiscal policy that's helped stimulate consumer growth. And while they did have a dip in 2020, 2021 really got them back to levels that they had previously experienced in terms of GDP growth. Singapore was surprisingly on the negative end of economic growth, but we actually look at that as somewhat of a good thing. Singapore typically is seen as the stable market and the stable economy, and the region really looks to them to set the example. And so as they started to see that economic downturn due to businesses not being able to go out and have meetings, they finally started to ease some of those restrictions, which really helped some of the other markets follow suit and begin to ease off their restrictions. Malaysia was impacted significantly by the break in tourism, but like we mentioned, no one was more impacted by tourism like Thailand was, which really represents about a fifth of their economy. The Philippines was one of the worst performing countries in the world. And that is in most part due to their lockdowns. Philippines, once the pandemic hit, in order to curb the impacts of it, really shut down the entire country. My predecessor, Joe Sowers, who has been living in the Philippines, mentioned to me as I was starting my tenure there that schools are closed down there, and they've been closed down since March of 2020. Not only are the kids not able to go to school, but the kids, up until about November of last year, weren't even allowed to leave the house. And so really their lockdown restrictions were very stringent, which really impacted the public's ability to move about the country, consume, stimulate the economy, and it shows through certainly in their negative economic growth. I guess the question that we ask though is, so when is economic recovery expected to happen? Well, as we see in Vietnam, I mean, like I'd mentioned, not only did they recover, but they actually saw significant growth throughout the pandemic. Indonesia has had strong growth as well in 2021 and reached full recovery. The vast majority of the region is set to recover by the end of this year. Philippines is back open. Malaysia and Cambodia are starting to see some growth as restrictions are eased, and we expect the recovery to happen in 2022. In Thailand, again, based on the impact of the tourism industry and the hotel industry, their economic recovery is going to be a little bit slower and may take a little bit longer to get that full recovery. Some of the island nations that rely almost solely on tourism, those areas are among the most impacted, and still recovery is expected to be fairly slow as we move forward. So going back to this slide, you can see how in the last couple of years, why this might have stalled some of this growth. Now, the next thing that I want to begin to touch on is the competition that we get from other exporters into the region. Australia being our primary competition in the region, given the proximity that they have to Southeast Asia, you're almost literally a stone's throw away from Indonesia and other markets that are really important to us. And so Australia, certainly with their near record crop in the 2020-2021 marketing year, created some competition for us, which contributed to that drop in our exports. Now, you also might recall that in 2016, 2017, that Australia had another large crop, but that crop was met with a lot of rain, which caused some degradation of their quality and really impacted their ability to their quantity of exportable wheat. So really over the last 8 years, Australia has seen a pretty sharp decline in their exportable quantity of wheat up until this last year. Now, if you overlay the US wheat situation, you can see that the exports to the region, we've really been able to capitalize on some of those, that downward trend of Australia. Now, it's not just that there is more wheat available in the US, but what we've tried to do is make it so that there's more demand for high quality US wheat. So we've relied on technical experts in our region to show the consistency that comes from using US wheat flour in your flour grist. And we've done that through the use, especially of a quality testing method called solvent retention capacity, or SRC, that really highlights the functional protein of the flour along each step of the milling process. Our technician in Thailand, Mr. Roy Chung for US Wheat, he often says that there is no bad flour. There's just flour that hasn't been used correctly. And what he's talking about is, as you go through the milling process, each flour is going to have a certain protein that's going to function well in a certain area. While some might function best for cookies, cakes, and biscuits. You also might see others that are functioning well if blended with bread wheats. And so he looks at utilizing as much wheat, as much flour that you can extract out of the wheat, and using SRC, this SRC testing method to highlight the different areas where you can use each stream of the milling process. It's really technical. I don't fully understand it, and I've asked to take a class from him so that I can better understand it as we move forward. But we've been able to use that to show that US wheat really is the most consistent, high-functioning wheat classes that you can get throughout the world. Our efforts have certainly paid off as we've moved through. This is a look at the 5-year average of US wheat export of our top markets for US wheat. As you can see, Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand all find themselves as top 10 markets. And this was really exciting in the last year, at the end of 2020-2021 marketing year. The Philippines, in terms of export inspections, took the very top spot for US wheat in the nation. So that was really exciting for us in the region to see the growth that's come from the Philippines. And then it was also encouraging to see that Indonesia and Thailand remained strong. That said, when we were sitting there and popping champagne and enjoying the celebration of taking that top spot, we did see some issues looming on the horizon that could threaten our ability to take that year in and year out. And that came from the drought situation in the US. Now, as farmers, I certainly don't want to talk to you too much about the drought, as your experience with it far exceeds mine. And certainly there's nothing that I'm going to say that comes as a surprise to you in terms of last year. But what I do want to point out is the regions that were most impacted by the drought were in the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Plains, where we grow our soft white wheat and our hard red spring, respectively. And those drought situations really did impact the quantity that we had available to export to our markets. And with the region the way that it is, 90% of the imported wheat into the South and Southeast Asia region come from DNS and soft white. And so to see droughts happening like that in those regions really did impact our ability to get wheat into that market. Now,
in the past 5 years, I have not received more calls than I have.
Sorry about that. So what that did is allowed us to look at the way that we were look at the information and that we wanted to disseminate out to our customers. And really over time, we've been committed to our customers to be transparent as an industry. So our inspections that we have through FGIS and the Washington State Department of Agriculture really does highlight that we want to let our customers know exactly the type of wheat that they're getting. And we've committed to be transparent. And in that spirit of transparency, we also wanted to give them real-time updates and in a frequency that they would be able to know what was coming down the line and adjust their decisions. And so we set up several discussions that we would talk about to get this information out to them as we saw it coming down. The drought situation also, as we've seen, we're encouraged that the drought situation is finally starting to improve. We've had reports of good snow, and especially some forecasts from some of our top forecasters in the region have have projected good spring weather, and our customers are encouraged by that. We keep encouraging our customers to look to some of those forecasts to be able to see what the wheat is doing so that they can make good decisions. Now, also, we're encouraged by the precipitation and the outlook for that for the spring. Hopefully, though, what we can see is that extend out into other regions like the spring wheat growing regions so that we can see more recovery come faster for our markets. Looking at our export prices, that's really where the drought saw its impact. So other challenges around the world were showing up through increasing prices. Not only was there a drought in the US, but droughts in Canada, Russian taxes on exports, and rain in Australia. All of those things are impacting the world price of wheat. And that's a big concern because, as we talked about through the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation is a major concern for consumers. Their disposable income is down, and to raise a price on their staple product really hits where it counts, and certainly the impact is felt not only socially through the impacts to people's well-being, but also the political pressure that's received to keep those prices low, when flour millers, just like farmers, seem to be more price takers as opposed to price givers. And so it's a challenge for them to increase prices with certain government regulations in order to offset theirs and stay in the black. So we saw really on April 1st was a drop in price, but as we say, that was April Fool's Day. And so since that point, we've seen hard red spring grow 48%, soft white grow 66%, and hard red winter's price increased by 55%. So really, really high prices coming into the mills. That's also something that I'm sure you've all faced, as we've heard reports of those inputs that you rely on from overseas that are coming in, and the prices that are just shooting through the roof. And so these high prices are certainly a concern around the industry. That, like I had mentioned, the meetings with, or the impact to the consumer certainly was felt, especially with the pandemic hitting and the financial impacts from COVID. Increasing prices really does mean disaster. And so we were able to have some engagements with our industry and also with the government. That's Secretary Ramon Lopez of the Department of Trade in the Philippines, and to really explain the situation of what was happening and try to get them to understand why prices were going up, and walk them through the process so that they could understand that when the industry was coming to them with a proposed price increase in their food, that it was justified and not something that they were just trying to make a quick buck on. And that really did resonate, as we saw when bread prices were announced to rise for the first time shortly after that. It was really looking at the global impacts of prices on wheat and flour, wheat and sugar that was causing this, and not just blaming businesses and corporations. And so that was helpful. Also, we saw some quality concerns that came into the industry, with our protein levels being quite high, the highest that we had seen since the early 90s. And again, this is where our strength of the US marketing system was able to shine through, because where most people have focused on protein throughout the years, our efforts in promoting this SRC technology has really positioned us to work well through these challenges and help the businesses, the flour mills, continue to look at what protein was available and perhaps gain some cost savings by taking that higher protein and using an SRC profile to continue to extract what they need out of it and help their bottom line. And so what we did was, as we saw that as the protein situation unfolded and we saw what it was going to be, we put together a presentation that highlighted strategies for mills to be able to process high protein soft white. And so this was a webinar series that was attended by about 250 people throughout the region, and highlighted the impacts that they could achieve if they just took that higher protein wheat. And that really did help us mitigate the impacts of the protein situation in the region. That was also made available where they could watch it anytime that they wanted, and be able to see that, pass it along to their colleagues in other parts of the world, and really have a global impact to highlight the benefits of using SRC technology to process soft white. Which really brings us into kind of our long-term strategy moving forward, with the very first thing being blending our webinars with traditional programs. We found that as we've worked through the COVID-19 pandemic and been forced to move to webinars, that this way of doing business is not only effective, allowing participants the chance to watch remotely, but it's also economical in that it saves on travel expenses, room rentals, and is able to have wide dissemination, not only being useful for the region's clients, not requiring people to take time from work to travel somewhere and take up a day or a couple of days or even a week to get this information, that they're able to do it at their convenience, and really helps us get information out in a very timely way that allows them to get real-time information, which is especially helpful when we do have some of these challenges like what we've seen in the last year. So what they say, they say that if you're in good times, you work hard, and if you're in challenging times, you've got to work harder. And so that's what we did. We really tried to put together robust programs that would help the mills and the bakeries work through a lot of their challenges that they face, not only from a quality perspective, but just from a process perspective, and helping them realize cost savings and see the value in using consistent quality from US wheat. That started with technical webinars by our baking expert, Roy Chung, who was able to put together several technical presentations to bakeries that talked about things like frozen dough. His big thing is he wants you to be able to sleep. And so if you use frozen dough, you can leave it out to defrost and get some rest, and then wake up in the morning instead of having to mix your dough. But the other presentations that he gave, probably more technical than I am able to explain, but certainly incredibly useful for our industry. We are also able to leverage our relationship with Korea. Korea is really a leader in pop culture. I don't know if you've heard the music genre K-pop or seen the Netflix series Squid Game. Many of the cars that we drive come from Korea, many of the electronics that we use. So Korea is really leading the way, and that translates into their baking sector as well. So if Koreans tell them that the markets that they should be focusing on something, people generally listen. And so our relationship with Mr. David O and our Korea office for US Wheat, these webinars allowed us to do baking demonstrations for our baking industry and introduce new and exciting products to their operations. Then we were able to use our technical team around the world. We had Andres Saturno in Latin America, Peter Lloyd in the Middle East, Tarek Gahil also in the Middle East, be able to come together, put together presentations that we could then, and these were on milling seminars, that we could then use this information and disseminate it out to a wide audience. So really what this long-term strategy does is allows us to not only disseminate the information coming out of our region, but the information that's coming from US wheat technicians around the world, and has really encouraged a lot of participation from our customers. Along those same lines, what it's highlighted to us is we need to continue to focus on technical training. That's been a strength of ours in the past, and it's going to be our strength as we move forward. So in that sense, we put together a School of Wheat Quality, which was a 6-week-long program that focused on encouraging mills to focus on quality and take advantages in the end use products. And we had 67 participants in this. They partially funded their own tuition and really helped move forward the conversation in quality. And it's really been unmatched regionally. One of the major quality control managers mentioned that the last time she heard that she had participated in something as extensive as the School of Wheat Quality was 25 years ago. And so it's something that was really missing in the region, and something that we want to move forward into the future. Also, coming from our competitors, such as the Canadian International Grains Institute, or CIGI, they really haven't been present in the market. They've really dropped off the map and haven't been seen to participate. In fact, at a presentation to the International Association of Operative Millers, or IOM, CIGI didn't even participate. They actually hired out a third-party inspection company to talk about their wheat situation. However, US wheat continues to be represented at these events. We've embraced the virtual technology, and any opportunity that we have to tell our story, we certainly take advantage of. And that's seen as we look at the industry's, the buyer's commitment to US wheat. This is a look at hard red spring prices in relation to Canadian spring wheat prices. And really, if you look since the beginning of the marketing year, there's been an average premium of about 81 cents per bushel. And still, the Southeast Asia region is committed to using soft or hard red spring in their grist, and has been committed to paying the premium to get the quality that they need out of it. Looking to other competitors, we have the Australians, and they've really only put together 3 programs. And in those programs, and trying to capture some of the US market share, their programs have focused on Asian baking, which typically isn't their strength. This year, they also released a paper that talked about trying to use low protein Australian noodle wheat in order to replace the higher protein soft white wheat. Now, a couple of things that were highlighted in this paper that they put out that we noted is, in it, they recognized SRC as the regional standard for quality testing, which really is thanks to the efforts of US wheat. But using that SRC data to prove the premise of their claim, they also admitted that Australian standard white wheat, or ASW, is not a suitable replacement for soft white. Now, typically in the past, the Australians have tried to use the ASW to compete against soft white. So effectively, what they did our marketing for us, and we feel like we owe them a beverage or something after that, in order to thank them for admitting what we knew all along, that soft white was really the standard for the region. They also, as we evaluated their claims with SRC, it really showed that Australian noodle wheat didn't provide the consistency that the market needs in order to move forward. So really, this premise in trying to get rid of their bumper crop really did more to make the case for US wheat than it did for Australian wheat. So we were excited to see how Australia is going to continue to help the US market its wheat. The other thing that we have as a long-term strategy is we want to make sure that we cultivate a strong team. We've got our team in South and Southeast Asia. On one side, we have Matt Weimer, who was the US wheat representative in Singapore, and then Roy Chung, who has been a familiar face throughout the region for many years. And then we recently hired Ivan Go, who will be Roy Chung's prodigy in that, or protege in the region. Also on the Manila side, Joe Sowers was there leading the team for more than 10 years. And then our technical team, Sir Jerry Mendoza, who has been with us for about 10 years and is getting ready to retire, and taking his place is Adi Redondo. Now, Adi has been incredibly helpful as he's come on board. Really, as we talk about our technical or our efforts in using technology to disseminate information, that has been something that Adi has really contributed to, and really become the leader throughout the company and the world in disseminating our message using technology. But as things change, Matt Weimer joined the Great Resignation of 2021, and Joe Sowers took his place. And then in November, I also joined the Great Resignation of 2021 with the Washington Grain Commission, and joined US Wheat to take over their Manila office. And the challenges have really been apparent as I've gotten started in reaching the customers, having to work through some of the travel restrictions and work the first almost over half year of my time remotely. But we've been able to manage our way through that by what I call being boots on the ground from Spokane, Washington, and really get to meet most of the mills. I've met with 14 of the mills over my time virtually, and been able to have conversations with them. Also meeting with our USDA offices in the region to talk about different opportunities that exist. I continue to work Manila hours and avail myself to customers. But really through all this, what I want to say is I wouldn't have been able to do any of this had it not been for my time at the Washington Grain Commission. And so I want to take a moment to just thank you for the opportunities that your state has given me. That I came in not working very much with the wheat industry, and was really welcomed by the farmers and the industry leaders. And it's given me a lot of experience and knowledge that has allowed me to then take this to my post in Manila and really create value there, and continue to serve you as I work throughout my career at US Wheat. So I'm excited for the opportunities that lie ahead, but also grateful for the opportunities that I've been given as I worked in Washington State, and look forward to continuing to work with you. So moving along to the final part of our long-term strategy, we want to make sure that we maintain perspective on some of our key markets. Now, for the stable markets like Philippines and Thailand, we really want to create an all of the above service, making sure that we go after every opportunity that we can to be able to continue the growth and continue the stability and the commitment to those markets. Some of the markets have dropped off, as we'll see in just a moment, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. We want to regain sales in those swing markets. And then we're seeing, based on consumer numbers, markets like Bangladesh that will really become a powerhouse in the world economy in the near future. And so we want to expand opportunities in markets like Bangladesh. What we don't want to see is numbers like this. This is showing our marketing year total, our sales total through January, and what we have seen in the region is a 40% decline in our wheat sales to the region. And so that really comes from some of those swing countries like we had talked about, with Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. But if you look at it on a per country basis, there is some real strength that comes from the more stable markets like Philippines and Thailand, where you are down 24% in Thailand, 9% in the Philippines. But especially in the Philippines, what I want to point out is, with all of the supply challenges, with all of the shipping challenges and price challenges, really being down 9%, especially coming off of a record export year to the region, is quite impressive. And then if you look at our exports this year compared to the 5-year average, we're actually significantly above that average. And so that's very encouraging. However, in other markets like Malaysia, which has a big segment in subsidized all-purpose flour, which can use a wider range of quality, we've seen a big drop. And then really Indonesia and Vietnam have almost dropped off the map. And so we want to look at ways that we can reduce that demand elasticity and begin to see more consistent sales to some of those areas. One of the ways that we're going to be able to do that is looking at the automation of their baking lines. So here are some pictures of baking lines in Indonesia and Vietnam. As you can see, there's a lot of manual labor and a lot of hands-on. Now that creates a lot of challenges, especially as we see impacts like the COVID-19 pandemic, where mills and bakeries were actually bringing in beds to the building in order to have their employee base sleep there and work in longer shifts in order to reduce exposure and reduce absences due to COVID. So those challenges really highlighted some of the inefficiencies, but the real inefficiency that we see is with the manual labor, it doesn't quite need that consistent quality that people have come to expect out of US wheat. And so then what we want to shift them to is a more automated line where there's less hands-on, less ability for error, but what that requires from them is a more stable quality that is consistent year in and year out that they can rely on. And that's really what plays well to our wheat in the United States. What that does is really, as we start to see some of these consumer bases grow, that's going to poise us well to capture some of the market share. So with half of the consumer class coming from Asia, it's going to continue to be a force as we go through into the next decade. During that time, Indonesia is going to, over the next decade, where Indonesia is going to surpass Russia and, is going to surpass Japan and Russia in their consumer class. Philippines is going to be growing significantly, passing most of Europe. And then Vietnam is also going to be growing significantly and seeing some of the strongest consumer class growth in the world, but none like Bangladesh, which is going to be jumping up 17 places and really surpassing many of the world's largest economies. And so Bangladesh is something that we always keep an eye on and how to capture that. We also want to make sure that we're driving consumption. We use social media in Manila or in the Philippines to be able to do that, and it's been very effective. We're able to talk about the different health advantages to US wheat and using wheat in an everyday diet. And so it's really looking at how we can help move consumption forward. And really, it's been quite effective. I want to show a short video that highlights the.
Every day, people all over the Philippines are enjoying more wheat-based foods than ever before. Pandesal, tasty, cake, crackers, hopia, pancit, and so much more. Since 1961, U.S. wheat farmers have supported the Philippine wheat food industry, growing quality wheat and shipping it to the Philippines, where local millers produce the finest flour for manufacturers to neighborhood bake shops to make delicacies Filipinos know and love. At the same time, Philippine millers have supported U.S. wheat farmers. The Philippines consistently ranks as a top market for U.S. wheat exports. This partnership has helped make the Philippine industry one of the most dynamic in the world. This collaboration has created products Filipinos increasingly love and value, with each one consuming 50% more than they did just a decade ago. We believe the efforts of U.S. Wheat Associates have contributed in some small way to this growth. We've collaborated with the milling and baking industries in efforts like celebrating World Bread Day, joining wheat lovers at the bakery fair, and of course through our digital platform, Go Wheat. Our Facebook page where Filipinos can learn about wheat and love it even more. With over 100,000 likes on our page made up of mostly millennials and Gen Z, which means more wheat lovers for decades to come, creating amazing opportunities for both the U.S. and Philippine wheat food industry. It's a win-win situation for everyone. All year long, we post fun, interesting, and educational content about wheat. We celebrate the big events and sweet moments. Then there are times we talk about how wheat can be good for you, from your heart all the way to your brain. And at other times, we show appetizing wheat food you just can't wait to take a bite of, like all-time favorites and Filipino classics. Our posts can reach more than 500,000 people in one day and get more than 100,000 engagements from people all over the country. With all this plus your efforts, the Philippine wheat industry continues to grow bigger and bigger. As more Filipinos say, go wheat!
So as you can see, that's created a lot of success in actually driving the per capita wheat consumption, which at the beginning of our campaign was fairly stagnant. But as you can see in 2013, about the time that we started really engaging in that social media, has really increased over 35% since that time. The really important thing that I like to show is when you look at it on top of what GDP growth has done over time. Whereas you can see in the earlier years of wheat foods consumption, when the economy would dip down, generally you would see a dip also in the per capita consumption of wheat. But as we went through this recent dip in economic activity, we've actually seen some growth, which means that we're shifting the trend from wheat as being an indulgent food to wheat being a very staple food for the country. We want to make sure that we pass that information along. In a study done that we did on Indonesia, we look at ways that we might be able to capitalize on some of the growth that we've seen from the Go Wheat campaign. There's a need for translation services, both in our Facebook pages, but also in our technical programs that really help drive the consumption and the market in that region. And so that's something that we'll be focused on. So just to kind of recap our long-term strategy, I mean, there's no doubt that our region is going to continue to grow. And these last couple of years have certainly had challenges, but it's forced us to really think outside the box and be more innovative in how we can continue to market U.S. wheat classes. We will continue to work hard for you, and as we look toward future opportunities, we're really looking forward to working with you on seeing how we can continue to market the wheat coming out of this region, out of the Pacific Northwest. So on behalf of all of us, all of our customers in South and Southeast Asia, I want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for growing the world's highest quality wheat. And thank you for being here today for my presentation. So I'll be happy to take any questions should anyone have them. And stop sharing that so I can see everyone.
All right, anyone is welcome to unmute and ask a question, or feel free to put it in the chat box if you'd like. We will open it up for questions.
I was wondering if Mike Miller was going to ask a question.
Mr. Bippert, could you tell us what the prospects are with Myanmar? Obviously, they're a growing market, but they've got so many political problems. Can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, certainly Myanmar has been a target of ours, and we still do see some growth in providing some education. Some of that technical training will be valuable as we move forward. Really right now, with all of the turmoil that's happening politically, It's a challenge to obtain lasting growth in that area. And so we're looking for those small opportunities that we can gain to have them focus on US wheat as they think about their ability to expand. So again, that technical training and being able to help them understand SRC and flower stream selection that will allow them to utilize more US wheat as they move forward. But it'll be a challenging road just given the current political situation. So hopefully that changes soon, and then maybe we can make a little bit more inroads.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Well,
Quiet group today.
all right, yeah.
We'll do a drawing announcement if anyone wants to think on a question to ask. In a random drawing of our registrants, we have a Washington wheat tumbler going out to Kristen Blake. So we will get that to her. Just one, we'll do one more final call for questions and then we will wrap up. All right, thank you, Joe, and to all who joined us today. We hope you found this webinar beneficial and in a convenient format to participate. We'd also like to thank all AMO sponsors for making this program possible. We invite you to take part in the rest of our educational series, which continues tomorrow in Spokane for an in-person session with Dr. Randy Fortenberry and Drew Lyon. If you haven't already done so, feel free to give our office a call to register. You'll find information on the rest of our programs posted on WAWG.org. Thank you again to all and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.